When Jason Lemkin talks about you should just fire everyone, I think that is partly true. And if you can't change the person, you've got to change the person. A lot of founders are being far too nice, but sometimes it's not the people. Sometimes it's the process.
I just think the increasing verticalization, I see something like this just becoming potentially embedded in other products.
Yeah, I loosely do agree with your comments, Aaron. And we've seen a fair few pitches now that are just SafetyCulture, but verticalized. So it would just be interesting to see where their strategy is going into the future.
I'm going to make a little prediction. This external CEO that was appointed by Luke last year, I think he'll be gone in 2026.
One of the things I asked at a recent event where it was all board of directors when they said, we need to have capability uplift in boards with AI. And I, tongue in cheek, said, do you think we need to reevaluate the age demographics of boards and actually maybe open it up to some younger people who have done the course, would love to be involved earlier? And the room just went silent.
Good morning. How are we?
Bloody awesome.
Yes, I have bad allergies today, so my eyes are very puffy.
That's not fun.
No, but it's all right.
How are you, Don? Day 4 of 5-day fast?
What?
I'm doing a water fast, Ash.
Which doesn't mean he's fasting from water.
And a call yesterday, that's what they thought it meant.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought, and I didn't know. Okay, please explain.
I need a bit of a reset. Have you ever heard of what autophagy is?
No? Only after you gave me the name for it the other day. Yeah. I had heard of this before, but didn't know the name.
So the Nobel Prize winner in 2016 won the prize based on his work in understanding this concept of autophagy. And I'm probably going to fuck this up, but essentially when you withhold glucose and sugars and whatever else from cells, he first found this with yeast. But when you withhold that from cells, cells will start to eat themselves. And what they do is that they focus on the inefficient, the unhealthy, and the problematic one, which is why subsequent research on this stuff seems to be correlating it a bit to it's a body's ability to also go after cancer cells and after cells, although that's not fully tried and tested. But after about 2 to 3 days of restricting calories, first you get into this sort of whole ketosis thing where it will burn fat. But then after a bit more period of time, it'll actually start eating itself and eating cells. And the first couple of days, I must tell you, it was probably the hardest thing I've
So you haven't
done.
eaten?
No.
Like anything? What?
Now, it was actually my brother-in-law who had done it once before. He got to day 4. And then on Saturday, he messaged, he said, we should do this together. And I was like, no chance. I need to eat every 15 minutes at the moment. But then as the weekend went on, I was like, maybe, because it has been something that I want to A, do, and B, I do want a reset coming into next year. So come Sunday night, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I think everyone needs to have, his name's Luke Carey, my brother-in-law. Everyone needs to have a Luke in their life, because whether it's the farm or this or other things, there'll be a lot of times when I just don't want to do something, even though I should, because I'm inherently lazy. And you've got to have that person in your life that often just goes, no, let's just go and do it. And a lot of the stuff at the farm, at home, or whatever else is all because Luke has gone, no, we come on, let's go do it. And a credit to him for pushing me to do this, because I feel much better now. Like day 4.
Have you had juice, smoothies, bone broth?
No, it is
just water.
The world record, I think, is something like a year. Like this really huge dude a long time ago. But if you actually do the research and spend a little time on it.
But you did it. You just said, Luke, did you research this or did Luke
Day one when I'm starting to really go, fuck, this is hard. Then day 2, to keep me in the game, I'm like, I better start doing some research on this stuff. Otherwise, I'm gonna fall off a perch. Day 3 started to feel really better. Day 4, still a little edgy, but mental clarity is really good. Could I go and run a marathon? No, but to try and get through to-do lists and do work and work with people and whatever else, I'm totally fine. And so there's now this fight inside of me where I now know that I don't actually need the level of carbs and shit that I have been eating, but there's this underlying every now and then that goes, no. Let's smash a loaf of bread. So now I'm
you
with
also
myself.
smash a loaf of bread?
Who doesn't?
Okay.
The other two are just laughing their asses off for listeners at home at the moment.
No, I'm super curious. I've done intermittent fasting a fair bit. The longest fast I've done before is like 2.5 days. And I remember feeling so mentally clear. But then when I went back and read some of the emails I wrote towards the end of that fast, they were somewhat incoherent. But no, based on your experience,
Day, on Tuesday afternoon, though, by 3:00, there was a whole lot of people coming wanting to discuss complex things. I was like, today's not the day. You're just going to have to leave me alone.
But I'm so keen to give it a go. I've never done a fast that long, so I'm going to commit to doing it.
Now, what it's taught me about B2B sales is nothing. But so as part of this, because I'm on a bit of a health kick, have you seen the advertising for Everlab?
Yes.
It is a schmick user experience. And you put your Medicare number in and it goes back and finds all of your prior blood tests and then starts mapping how you've been progressing. And then you meet with a quack and then you do another series of tests. I'm doing my DEXA scan, which I've been talking forever. Jack, you'll be pleased to know I'm getting my testosterone done, but instead of making up a erectile dysfunction, I'm just paying the $65. I couldn't.
I love that there's going to be a whole heap of listeners that have no context for that.
Jack, have you updated yours recently?
No, I haven't. Don't need to at the moment.
So I called Vu-Tran. I messaged him and then he said, hey, give me a call. Because remember he'd recommended we do some CT stuff. So I asked for his advice on a couple of things. But then we were having a chat about one MRI, Everlab, the whole direction of where it's going. He's a great guy to have a chat with. So I appreciated him giving me some time.
But it is interesting how fast the medical world's moving at the moment. Like I finally got my MRI scan and it turns out I do have a brain, which is good. But I went back to the GP to go through the results and there is some white matter there. And I was talking to my GP about the work my sister has done, who is a GP in this space and this whole new emerging area. And he's like, could you connect me with your sister? Because I'd love to learn all about this. I'm like, well, this isn't really the reassuring moment I was hoping for my GP, but sure, happy to. But
Vu, that's setting up these health hubs. Vu and I were talking. He said, well, it's just the structure. The GP, in order to make $1, has to bill in 8-minute increments. The drugs that you prescribe will be based on the memory you have of the last rep that came to see you, probably how you're feeling that day as well. It's not based on that individual and the latest study and whatever else. That the system isn't set up to support that. And so things like Everlab and what we're doing with this health hub is there is actually a demand for people that are happy to leave the Medicare free system, move into a paid system where actually you can get up-to-date stuff. Like, how is it that I'm 42 years old and never heard the word autophagy and the process and the science that's now gone into it? No GP has ever had that conversation. Now, maybe I'm just stupid, but you've got to be, I think, investing in what's coming out at the moment, and the general practitioner world is not set up to drive that.
No, totally. And then it gets scarier even as you go regionally, like chatting to the neighbours who are both doctors, specialists. They were talking about just how the skill set drops off and the knowledge base drops off just from connectivity as you leave the postcode of Brisbane and go within the state. So super interesting space. Well, Don, we're keen to hear how the fast wraps up.
It will wrap up quickly.
I want to know what the next meal is after you finish.
I think tomorrow lunch. I think that'll be me done. Well, let's get into some news. Just a bit of a recap. So the public examinations of the StrongAI founders and directors have started, and I've been following along some of the court reporting. But Max Mitto was one of them first up. That I've had the dubious what's the word opportunity to partake in a public examination before with a company. I was the appointed director from a listed company. I had founded it originally. We had listed, then we had some subsidiaries that we put into administration due to a range of, I guess, strategic and execution fuck-ups that would be fair to say form at least part of my portfolio support and some of the lessons that came out of that. But when you're sitting in these public examinations and you've got these lawyers and barristers and whatever else, one of the challenges is they review decisions from many years ago that you often can't remember. They put you on the spot. Now, in that instance, that company had gone into liquidation. Then all the documents and the files had gone with the parent company, and there was a whole lot of problems. But it is a difficult position to be in. But one of the things that it has been admitted that they had put together the acquisition, the $8.8 million acquisition of Member Benefits Australia. And it seems like they went unconditional on that. And in order to settle on it, they needed the $10 million round when they brought in. And so this article in Capital Brief said, appearing under questioning from barrister Richard Scrubby for the liquidators, Middo confirmed that the Member Benefits Australia transaction was subject to finance and that Strongroom would be unable to pay amounts due to MBA if an anticipated capital raise had failed. The point here that I just want to, it's just a good reminder that founders often get themselves into boxed in positions where they've gone and done something and they absolutely need a whole series of other things to occur, like a capital raise, and then are willing to stretch the boundaries of reasonableness and then move into areas that are not good to try and still keep that thing correct, instead of just pausing, admitting that it can't be done, at least ethically and correctly. Even in some other articles, it talks about how the tax liabilities had been building up, which is why we become a little bit sensitive to companies. If you've got to direct a penalty notice stage, if you've got to those kind of stages, that's where we would start to get a bit nervous. But to me, the lesson here is finding ways to still achieve what you want, but not box yourself in where you feel compelled to do stupid shit.
It's going to be awesome at the 1013 runway event at the end of the month to hear from Joe Zhao. He's going to be talking about the Strongroom AI journey. And from what Sophie shared the other night at drinks, he's willing to talk about everything. Like he reckons he's going to be pretty transparent. So I'm looking forward to hearing from him.
Jack, Ash?
Yeah, nothing there, Don.
All right, then in some news, there was an article in the AFR talking about SafetyCulture boss spruiks AI rocket fuel after a $49 million loss. The chief executive of SafetyCulture says the advent of increased artificial intelligence capabilities gives it big new growth opportunities after increasing spending on global marketing initiatives and new executives that saw its losses widen in 2025. SafetyCulture is one of Australia's biggest private technology firms. The annual accounts filed with the corporate regulator show the company made a $49 million loss in the past financial year, which is up from $35 million the previous year on revenue that increased by 20%. I'll just pause there for a minute. I'm going to make a little prediction. This external CEO that was appointed by Luke last year, I think he'll be gone in 2026. With growth now down at 20%, and keep in mind in the world of AI and their losses expanding and the expenditure, it talks about new executives that have come from, I'll check here, but there's companies that have come from Microsoft and all sorts of other larger companies. When you take a founder like Luke and their energy and their drive and their passion, I will bet you that 20% growth is below what they would have wanted, especially in the world of AI. And the fact that they're talking about, they're in the gunner stage. AI is gonna provide us all of these opportunities. In this world, for the scale that they are and the future investors and even a listing, I'm not sure who gets out of bed for 20% growth.
No, I agree. It's one thing for losses to be increasing if that's been invested into growth and we're seeing the growth outcome. But if the revenue only increased by 20%, and I know some might hear only by 20%, but in our world, and particularly with AI and the growth we need to be seeing, it's not performing as we would have thought. I still don't see, like, it's still a horizontal play, right? Like I don't see SafetyCulture's future personally. Like, how is it going to maintain?
That's a big call.
Yeah. Well, I just think the increasing verticalization, I see something like this just becoming potentially embedded in other products.
Embedded in other vertical solutions. And a company that we had a look at had SafetyCulture-esque vibes, but then was coming at it from a hardware point of view, and SafetyCulture themselves were doing that as well. It'd be interesting to see how SafetyCulture's move into hardware is progressing. Jack?
Yeah, I like loosely do agree with your comments, Aaron. And like we've seen a fair few pitches now that are just safety culture but verticalized. So it would just be interesting to see where their strategy is going into the future.
One of the oldest patterns that we talk about all the time on this podcast is when the founder moves to executive chairman role, so still has a role in the business, and then appoints an external CEO. Founders build companies that are well-tailored suits to them, how they like to operate, how they like to behave, how they like to... If you look at SafetyCulture's marketing, the article talks about how they spent money on the Rally Australia sponsorship, Tennis Australia, like they're using very broad, I guess, marketing partnerships to try and sell a very broad product. But a lot of those things are based on the founder's desires and passions. And Luke loves his motorsport. So next minute, SafetyCulture is advertising and sponsoring and doing things in Rally. And then you hire someone external and you try and you say, okay, you're CEO now, I'm going to hand this off. But the founder's built a well-tailored suit to them and the new person often doesn't fit. So there's this whole period of time of bringing in new people. So a new guard forms whilst there's still an old guard. The old guard still has a direct relationship with the founder. And what happens behind the scenes is people go around the new CEO when they don't like something. And to begin with, founders tend to go, oh, no, I've got to back this person. But after a while, when results aren't quite where we're at and we aren't moving at a speed that I bet you would be desired inside of that organization, little things start to chip away. Then conflict starts to occur and then that ends up leaving. So I'm just going to put a little stake in the ground. And then when the reports of it coming, it's never the background story. There's always family reasons or personal reasons or a new opportunity. We really want to thank them for their service to the company, but actually behind the scenes, it's a repetitive process. And then what will happen is either Luke will step back in for a period of time and then they'll go and do the same thing again. Or if he's got all sorts of other bits and pieces going on, a new CEO will be appointed and then the same thing happens. Have a look at, money doesn't solve these things. It's process that solves them. Have a look at Andrew Forrest with the revolving door that Twiggy has with executives. Even being Australia's richest man with all the money in the world doesn't solve this. It's actually a process thing that the company has to evolve. And that's one of the things I pride our work with founders on, is that I think we do a pretty good job there.
Hopefully we eat our words and we're totally wrong and SafetyCulture just kicks along and goes gangbusters.
Hope is not a good risk management strategy. And most listeners would know this podcast, if you're coming for hope, think you might be in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Well, on the sort of AI theme, sorry, Ash, have you got that one?
No, nothing valuable.
So on the AI theme, this is an excerpt from a recent 20VC podcast that I thought I'd just play and then we discuss. And it forms a little bit of a conversation we've been having with Portfolio.
But you better find a way to be relevant. And I like your expression, Jason, the age of AI. You better find a way to matter in this world and co-attach to the spend. And I think you're exactly right, Jason. That is the message for any of your companies that were pre-2021, that are pre-GPT companies. Maybe you can't make yourself into the next Harvey or the next OpenAI, but by God, you better co-attach to that spend because it's the only game in town. I think you're totally right. And you should be preaching that to all your guys as we come into the end of the year and looking at 26.
And look, sometimes it's luck. Like the CEO of WorkOS, Michael Grinick, he was posting, I think they went from, I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but something like 20 to 40 in 5 months, okay? And he's been working hard for years on WorkOS to be and OAuth and authentication layer, but all the AI guys used them. So seeing insane growth. We've all seen portfolio companies, and sometimes you got to make your own luck, but we've had 18 months. Like, get a little bit of the Harvey. You got to find it, and it's like it's at the edge of too late. Not because there's not time. I actually think there's plenty of time for startups. It's because your team isn't good enough. If you haven't gotten a boost this year from AI, fire half your team right before the holidays. Give them a turkey and 3 months of severance, but they failed. Your team is not good enough. They had 18 months to ship a product that mattered in this world. Where's your agent? Where's your reacceleration? No more excuses after Thanksgiving. But the irony is it's early. At the same time, what we're all learning now, we feel like it's late with all the stuff we talked about, the cursors and replets and levels, Sierras, but it's actually so early in so many categories, right?
It's just 3 years since ChatGPT shipped.
Yeah, but you got nothing. You did not reaccelerate this year. Fire yourself or half your team. Take your choice. Fire yourself or half your team at the end of this year. Don't keep those folks that don't have the answers around. You're better off with just not having them. You had time, right?
Sometimes when Jason is cruel and harsh, I disagree. And then sometimes I listen and I go, he's absolutely right. This is one of the latter ones. I mightn't say it as harshly, but I think you're exactly right, Jason. If you're not on this train now, you're just not going to be relevant, and you will be sold for 3 times run rate revenues to a PE firm who will smush you in with something else, never to be seen again. And you have your chance. And it's raining money in this space, and you need to navigate your product towards it. Or eventually you're going to get tired, the VCs are going to get tired, your team's going to get tired, and something's going to just not work out.
Yeah. It took me a while to see the data to believe that software companies could really capture dollars from replacing humans for real. It's not that I didn't believe it. It's just so much of the stuff was VCs talking out of their rears, making stuff up, talking about how every human's going to be replaced with an agent when the software wasn't very good. It just wasn't good. It was hard. It was a great dream, but now we're really seeing it. Agents are better than mediocre humans. So you better be tapping into that revenue too. They're better than mediocre humans. So get going, guys. Like, if the age of the co-pilot is behind us, how are you replacing humans? This is your job in B2B software, is to genuinely replace humans.
I think that's right. My energy towards the end of this year is, if you have not this year found a way to get some kind of benefit, acceleration, whatever else, using even some basic AI, you've probably got to give yourself an F. Now, I think there's a reason structurally, which I'll get to in a minute, for founders to consider. I think it's a bit harsh saying the people are idiots. Often the environment, the culture, and the process is the problem. But before we get there, what were your thoughts?
This actually is exactly what I was going to mention, Don, on the SafetyCulture piece, where they have so much unique IP to be able to provide rocket fuel per the article, but to think they haven't had growth at the speed with the ability of they are trying to embed AI. I just find it hard to believe they haven't been able to push to the market some quick wins. And it's even market signals of things that they were probably working on for the past 3 years. How that hasn't accelerated the timeline of release, and maybe it has, I don't know the product inside and out. In my mind, I think about AI being pushed into a business in kind of a 4-quadrant, and everyone's wanting to get to this kind of business transformation, and we're all in this bottom left-hand quadrant in my head. And this is where you might have a few people using GPT or Claude or Copilot, and there's really 2 paths to get to organizational transformation. One is to actually redesign your processes as a business. That takes time and energy, a lot more strategy, a lot more deep thinking, but is one path. And then the other path is broad enablement of actually immersing AI into your business in terms of platforms, governance, as well as education and uplift. You need both in order to get to this organizational transformation piece. And so I think a lot of businesses are stuck in this bottom left-hand quadrant, which is you might be having productivity gains on a single person, but they're not compounding. So you're not seeing that massive growth. The ones that are doing it well are the ones that are doing maybe a bit of path 1, as well as path 2 of the broad enablement part to get there, and they're on that trajectory. But I think there's a lot of businesses stuck in this bottom left-hand quadrant.
I think there are a few things in here for me. One is even talking about pre-GPT companies as a vintage. So we often talk about 2021 vintage companies for the cycle in the venture capital markets, but actually looking at it as pre 3 years ago, because GPT's only been out over 1,000 days. And I think the investment communities in Australia is talking a lot like this. We still see a lot of funds deploying capital into AI, although we're starting to hear that now most VCs are recognizing there is a bubble there and starting to question their investments. But I'm not hearing in Australia these types of conversations. And so I think we should start the stopwatch from this podcast on that excerpt you've shared for how long until we see this as a mainstream conversation in Australia, because I'm not seeing it with other investors talking about their portfolio and this sort of thing. For me, it's that point around capability. I know you're going to go deeper on this, Don, but yeah, you look at the Australia. So AICD in Australia are saying that the number one most demanded content for directors of companies is learning about AI because they feel underqualified. And I think there's that issue in the Australian market, but also something we talk about a lot, which is experimenting with AI and giving your teams giving them the freedom to experiment with AI to develop the capability, even if you don't yet know the outcome or the application. And I think to your point, Ash, like I still don't see enough companies actually developing that capability piece, which I know Don is going to segue into what you're going to talk about. But I think for founders listening, you have to be, I agree with you, Don. I don't think it's about fire your team right now if they're not getting this outcome, but how do we actually set up the frameworks for this capability to be developed and to have the culture for this capability to be developed as well?
The one thing I'll just add on that is just the enablement piece of letting people experiment. If you are a founder or executive or a director, do that safely and securely. Like there are a lot of businesses that handle very sensitive information. And so don't just be leveraging the latest kind of shiny toy off the internet. Make sure that you have someone doing the vendor analysis, looking at where your data is going to be stored, how they're going to be potentially using it to train models and so forth. Like just take a moment. Yes, we want to enable people to experiment and learn and grow, but we also don't want there to just become cyber risk and just become potential. You're on the front page of the AFR. And so I think that's a lot of the conversations we're having, Aaron, at that director level in line with that AICD commentary is around, well, how can we provide some guardrails? How can we help people experiment, but also do it in a way where we know our trade secrets, there's no going to be PII, etc. leakage. So I think there's that. We don't want to put handcuffs in place, but we do want to have someone controlling the throttle in terms of here's our validated toolkit that anyone can go and use.
Are you get much interest at the board level, Ash, from like the AICD?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things I asked at a recent event where it was all board of directors when they said, oh, we need to have capability uplift in boards with AI. And I, tongue in cheek, said, do you think we need to reevaluate the age demographics of boards and actually maybe open it up to some younger people who have done the course, would love to be involved earlier? As we saw a wave of younger generation through the technology shift when SaaS became big, I think there needs to be an evaluation, and the room just went silent.
Really? I was so curious how it was received.
Oh, just silent. Just all stares at me, and I was like, well, this is the problem. Like, it's so hard to get on your first board, and yet there's the skills and the innovation DNA and all of that they want to help enable at a governance level. But we are spending quite a bit of time helping them understand it, particularly like if you think about it from the comparison to the SaaS era, where you had model lock-in, like we have model lock-in in this AI era as a risk to consider. You had your vendor lock-in, whether that be a Microsoft lock-in, whether that be a CRM, which is harder to get out. And so we're trying to compare it back to things that they've gone through and shifts in pain points. But Jack, you'll find this interesting. We've actually pitched Stone and Chalk, and I'm actually running a 2-part education series over the next 2 weeks with founders. And so it's me and another founder who runs a cybersecurity business. And so I got asked to come and talk to founders about AI. And my response was, if I'm having to talk to founders about how to leverage AI in their business won't be here in 6 months. I don't think that's a good use of Stone and Chalk's funding. I said, what could be a really interesting use case is the fact that cybersecurity and AI governance are skill sets that are quite expensive to get access to. I was like, why don't we actually talk to founders about how they should be thinking about their business, AI governance and cybersecurity, and how they intersect, but also their posture on how they can communicate that. Because if you want to sell into enterprise, you want to start to scale, these are the aspects of AI and cyber that founders struggle to get their grasp around. So we're delivering that over the next 2 weeks, which will be interesting to see how it's received by founders. But it's something where we found it's a very young conversation to be having in the founder space, particularly because most of them didn't have businesses or weren't out of school when you went through the cybersecurity uplift 5-10 years ago as a country.
That's the frustrating bit, Ash. Like I remember, so after Startup Catalyst got acquired by the Australian Computer Society, and I was on the executive committee there, and they got commissioned to write a report on the future of technology in the mining and resources sector. And that report was funded by the likes of BHP, Rio Tinto, and all these others. And I read the draft, and there was no mention of autonomous vehicles in mining. Keep in mind, this is going back probably 5 years ago. But the CEO of ACS at the time, his response was, no, the industry isn't ready to hear that yet. I was like, you are fucking kidding me. This is going to happen whether or not you are ready. So this is where I think I don't want to pick on boards necessarily, but I do think that there are commercial factors at play where people are motivated to put their head in the sand, but it's such short-termism in terms of thinking. And so the world you're playing in, it's so needed, because I just really see the struggle for most boards, irrespective of age, most people even in Australia, to actually understand AI and understand exponential adoption and where this is heading and how fast it's coming at them.
Yeah, and I think the timeline feels fast if you're in it. Things are getting released every night when we wake up, right? But when you're not in it, it doesn't feel like it's moving as fast. And I think that's where a lot of this tension is as well, where they don't see how fast it's moving. They just see, oh, it's another headline about OpenAI, or it's, oh, Anthropic did something. It's not the nuance of, oh, model, we went from 4.0 to 5.1's on the horizon, and that timeline of what that model release has dropped tenfold. And so I think it's also like, if you're in it, you feel it, but if it's external, you don't. Yeah, and you're right, it's not just an age piece. That was more of a dig to just say, we need to actually look at the true capability matrix of what a board needs, less so how many years of experience you've been having. And my other concern is, like, if we don't actually give this next generation of board members or people who want to be some training from them, then like you're just going to have people who have never been on a board, not just one, but there might be 5, there might be 6, because everyone will retire. Like,
yeah, and the other element, the risk, like the risk that the personal risk that a director takes on by joining a company,
totally.
But therefore the risk aversion that permeates the board. And at the moment, AI is perceived as relatively unknown, or at least not understood. Therefore, ambiguity creates uncertainty, which creates a perception of risk. And I think this is where a lot of the decision making in the Australian market in particular, more so than US, which acts more out of FOMO, like we look so much at downside in this country that we just are hamstrung.
Yeah.
What other content is like the likes of Stone and Chalk, and like what are they asking for when they're engaging with you, or what are they seeing as the gaps?
They didn't.
It's interesting. After we got back from the US, when we had the session with Joel Pobar back in, that was last year, I remember reaching out to one of the hubs. I won't say which hub, but I said, hey, we've just come back from this. Happy to talk and share about what we've learned in AI and the mental model we've adopted. Their response was, oh, no, we have so much AI content. Like, we're just saturated. We don't want more content. I'm like, you haven't even asked what it was that we were going to talk about or what the learning was. You've just purely gone, oh no, we've talked about AI enough. And this is where I come back to these behavioral incentives and the way teams are set up. Like this is where Australia gets left behind, because if we're not getting those insights from other markets and we're just regurgitating the same stuff in a local echo chamber, nothing is actually going to change, or at least not at the rate of change that we need.
Yeah, completely. And obviously we've got the US trip in March, and then there's the trip in June as well. I just think it's so important to leave the bubble and get out the echo chamber and meet with smarter people, meet with businesses that are moving 10 times faster. How are you moving that fast? How do you scale? How are you thinking about it?
Jack, in the M&A stuff you're doing, the business broking stuff, like how many of those businesses actually have AI in there at all?
None of them. And if you talk like regional, they wouldn't even know what AI is. But to be fair, like it's service-based businesses and predominantly SA and tier, a lot of regional. So like there isn't a big need for it.
And they're profitable and they're nice little cash cows.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Sorry, I had to disappear for a bit. I'll catch up on what you guys went through. When Jason Lemkin talks about you should just fire everyone, I think that is partly true for some people and some companies. It is a people problem. And if you can't change the person, you've got to change the person. Like that is the reality. And a lot of founders are being far too nice, and the same with their investors in not getting with the program. But sometimes it's not the people. Sometimes it's the process. And as we've discussed in a lot of episodes, short term kills long term. And when I look at our portfolio, when I look at other founders in the ecosystem of people that we work with, they're so busy dealing with the short-term demands and day-to-day demands of customers and staff, and even shareholders often create some of this short-term stuff. They don't have a process to get out of the day-to-day, to find the time and the space to work on new things, work on change things. Now, we use a process from the Odysseus Institute that I've spoken about before. But unless you can get on top of this change loop, I think Jason's right, you're actually going to disappear. That's quite nice. We had a pitch from Tom and Jared from Duva, which is an IoT startup now, but they came to our offsite a couple of years ago. And they're obviously very clever and know where my ego lies. And they talked about a whole lot of stuff that they learnt at that offsite around potential improvement points, getting the structure set up for change. But Jack, it would be fair to say they've done an amazing job in the last 12 months of going from software to IoT to now 6 people to multiple countries, because they were able to implement the structures, I think, to change the business, except things went in the right direction. What were your thoughts based on that pitch?
It goes back to what Adrian talks about, like just trying to get rid of any of the friction in the sales process. And like they kept getting friction because they were a pure play software. So then they did the opposite of what everyone says to do. Like they went and built the hardware, but that actually reduced the sales friction. And now they're getting way more traction.
Yeah. And now the foundation for that was they had some processes of how to still run day to day, but change for the future. And so I think Lemkin is partly right. If you don't have the expertise, get rid of them. But a lot of the companies I deal with, they do actually have the expertise. They just haven't found a way to balance the short term and the long term. The other thing I've seen across multiple parts of our portfolio and others in the ecosystem is they try and go too big too quick, and they try and do too much in-house ownership rather than an external thing that they could replace later. And so what happens is, because they set up a too big a mountain for them to climb, the short-term demands kill them. Whereas actually, if you were to find some very basic stuff that you know is not going to scale, but it's a start, and then you use some third-party apps that might be just a little more expensive from a subscription point of view, but then you create a roadmap to replace all of those things internally. I've found people that do that approach win. The people that are falling behind are the ones that wanted to do it more themselves and have the deep technical approach and have it like almost as internal IP. The short-term demands of the business kill them, and they never get there. And so that's what I would suggest to listeners, that if in the cold light of day, look at this year and you haven't brought anything agentic AI, doesn't even have to be AI, like some of the stuff we're about to do with this podcast in terms of show notes and show pages and whatever else, that's not AI, but that's getting to a point where the status quo is not acceptable. We've gone and used Airtable with some integrations that Aaron led, and I think we're doing a really good job on. If you're not finding a way to get those little changes, you then don't have the time and brain space to go and achieve the big ticket items, and then you're going to die. That's my rant.
It's good though. And it's a good plug for the offsite, like learning these frameworks and capabilities to actually adopt. So
weird, I didn't even know we did offsites. That's cool. Can people come to those, Aaron?
They can. There'll be an offsite early next year going up on the website shortly. 3-day growth summit. And it's all about frameworks for sustainable, durable growth.
Well, given I ended on the word "you're going to die," that sort of actually transitions quite well to a post I saw on LinkedIn, Fred Destin. And what he suggests is when he says, whenever I suggest founders to meditate on the death of their startups, I get the same response. Are you nuts? And the same conclusion. Wow, that was really useful. Death meditation is a powerful practice, and here's why. Fear of failure will diminish you as a founder. You'll make worse decisions. You won't be able to act or work as effectively, and it'll psychologically impact you. If you have ever felt the fear to move from your belly to your chest, if you've ever felt fear moving from your belly to your chest, you know what I'm talking about. Most founders don't even want to envision that their company could crash, as if simply thinking about it was already an acceptance of defeat. And then he goes on and talks about his exercise. In what scenarios would the company fail? What difficult conversations do I need to have when it does? What will happen to my team? What happens to my status, my public image, my perception, and how do I make it through financially? Now, what he's suggesting is you really go in and do that, and then go and do the things that will stop you having to go and do that. But he also believes it releases the fear around that. And we're very aligned with that because we do our pre-mortems. Why will you die? And that can be a bit confronting to some founders, but because we're coming to the end of the year, it's about to be Christmas card time. And a tribe Christmas card, I think, in the best interest of founders is, you've had a good year, but here's why you might die next year. Potentially not all that pleasant, but I think is incredibly good because too often we get stuck in the weeds and we're not sitting there actually acknowledging the things that will kill us.
It's the best gift you can get, isn't it?
Well, in my consulting days at the Institute, we used to send out a Christmas card that just said, may you have many more problems next year. And
the reward for growth.
Some people didn't find it all that clever.
No, I love this. I think for founders to lean into this and do it as a practice, it doesn't mean sit in the emotional trough of fuckery, but what it means is actually coming at it with an analytical lens. And also I think this is where a third party perspective is invaluable. Like I think having someone else look at your business, look at who's familiar with it and provide that kind of clear line of sight to potential causality of death, and then scoring yourself honestly on it. Like how many of these things are we actually already doing or behaving in a way that could lead to this cause of death? And then you're able to take action against it. So for all the fear of avoiding these sorts of things, this is the medicine which will hopefully take away the pain. So lean into it and go into it wholeheartedly.
Jack?
No, I've got nothing there, Don.
Well, because I've had vastly reduced glucose and having to maintain my energy, the show notes. So, and have been a little bit too tired for any form of philosophy. And some of the stuff that did come up on my feed this week, I don't need the level of DMs that would come in from it.
So your theme of the week is fasting?
No, I think my theme of the week, if I was to connect it into that, and it's Aaron and I, before the show, were talking about, we go and see a particular physio, and he's got this technique. It would be fair to say, Aaron, it's probably the most intense pain.
It's a torture device.
It's unbelievable. And you feel the muscle, and then you start to feel the muscle release. And I've gone from a hobbling to being able to run 10Ks. Like, the man is a miracle worker, but you had to go through that pain and you had to go through that discomfort. We live in a world of the same pattern just repeats everywhere, right? And sometimes within founders and investors, you could see it if they could just get a little more comfortable with the discomfort and the pain, rather than trying to run off all the time to do something that eased the short-term pain, you would actually find a stronger and healthier company. And I think coming towards the end of the year, I would get you to sort of reflect on the year and go, what were all the points in time that I was uncomfortable with the discomfort? And had I just held on a little longer in that discomfort and done the right things, would I potentially this year have got a better result in the longer term? And if you come up with an answer of nothing, I don't know.
My theme of the week kind of similar, but Huberman had a podcast with Goggins, and he was talking about this part of the brain, the ACC, that gets bigger the more you do something you don't want to do, and then the necessary component is a bit you don't want to do. But that part of the brain grows larger and larger. And basically the podcast was hitting the point of proactively choosing to do things you don't want to do gives you the ability to do those things more easily going forward. But I think for founders, like to your point, Don, my kind of theme of the week is you see the founders who make it through, and I'm thinking of some friends who've had exits in the last couple of years, like they will attribute causality to all these things that happen in the business, but really they were very good at doing the shit that they didn't want to do, but had to do it anyway. And I think it's not just waiting for those moments in your business to come up and then facing them and doing them. It's actually, how do you train yourself to do that shit? And it's front of mind, Don, because, you're doing this fast this week, and I know how much on Monday you did not want to be doing that. When I look at this ingredient among successful founders, they all tend to throw themselves at whether it's adventures, whether it's weird new habits, whether it's trying new things that are a bit on the edge, but they step into that ambiguity, uncertainty, but more importantly, they step into the thing they don't want to do and do it anyway.
And then a big one, and it ties back to this episode, is often they don't want to have the hard conversations with staff, and they don't want to move people on that are trying but aren't delivering. And the world that we live in now, you've got to steel yourself and find some way to get over that, because if you're not willing to make those decisions in this era, you're in trouble.
Yeah. And it's amazing the story we tell ourselves in those moments about all the justifications and reasoning why. But I think I think if I could leave founders or anyone really, it's my own journey as well, like leaning into that discomfort practice.
Ash or Jack?
Yeah, I'll go. Theme for me this week is probably just like importance of zooming out. So it's been like really tough week. Louis hasn't been sleeping. He's got a cold. So it's just going to bed. It's just so painful because it feels like we're awake like every hour. But then when you actually zoom out and like it's 1 week out of 52, and it's really not that bad in hindsight, but in the time, it just feels so hard. You're in the trenches, and like there is a takeaway there for founders, and like the day to day is going to feel like that, like a roller coaster, even at Tribe. Like it's the same thing. Everyone's going to go through it. But when you zoom out and you go back to like why we're doing it, well, like it's still like it just realigns you and totally changes your perspective.
100%, Jack.
That is so good, Jack. I always have Adrian DeMarco's words in my head. Like, you're building a business for the next 20 years. Like, what happens this week is you've got to have that long-term view. That's so good, Jack.
And it's just crazy, like how quickly like humans just flip from like so good to, oh my God, it's so bad. But all you have to do is zoom out. Like, it's really not that bad. It's just a day of one suffering.
No, it is. And it is amazing that when you have a look at our ability to lose perspective quickly is very impressive. I assume it's like an evolutionary thing that you have to, I don't know, negative things have to make you fearful and concerned and anxious or whatever else, so then the tigers don't come and get us. I don't know. But it is amazing how quickly you can have so much and then your brain just goes, everything's fucking terrible. Why aren't you feeding me? Have some cereal. I like it, Jack. The 1 out of 52, I get what you're saying. If it was 1 out of 52, I think your perspective would be a little bit different. But I think what you're more saying is it's only 1 week every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I know when you said 1 out of 52, I was like, bloody hell, you've got a bloody awesome
No, but that's
pub.
also like the stint, like from when they fall sick to when they get better. It's a week. So each block's a week. So I think we had last week, I was telling you, Don, like I didn't touch wood because I said Louis sleeping right through. This is so easy. And then bang, this week sucks.
And it compounds when you have 4 kids. Like Mia's been off all this week with the flu, and now Cruzy's got something on his arm that looks like a staph infection that I've got to go take him to get checked in about 15 minutes time. So it's just like, it just rolls from one to the other.
Ash.
Wow. I don't really know where to go from there. My theme of the week has been trying to just think about the ecosystem more and how we all have such unique perspectives based on experience, what we're doing, how we tackle problems, we get out of the echo chamber and all of those great things. But South Australia and Queensland, I think, are very young ecosystems. And I've been, just trying to connect with people who feel the same about wanting to push the ecosystem forward and wanting to provide thoughts and feedback, but not just do the easy part, which is the feedback, but then actually part of the rebuilding in terms of, yes, I'll be at that event and I'm happy to host something, or I'll take ownership of this. And just being really conscious since I came back from Brizzy and seeing how much time and effort you guys put in up there, that it's a time to lift up the team on the Adelaide side and try to engage and see what we can get moving down here.
I like it.
Yeah, cool. Right. Well, Aaron, what he really communicated was, I want to leave less time for Sharts. So there's a few different component parts in this. This is a chart from 1970 to now of our meat consumption. Beef peaked, 1972 at like 68 kilos, and that has fallen to 20. But chicken has gone from 10 kilos up to like 60. Sheep has significantly fallen, 40 kilos down to 8, and pork has increased from 10 to 30. So I think I eat a bit more chicken, mostly just because Woolies have the cooked chickens there, and you just grab one and you move on. Now,
what's interesting though, like you think of the industries and their advertising, like get some pork on your fork. You think of what's the Aussie guy with the lamb campaigns, like. But at the same time, I don't hear any advertising campaigns for eat more chicken.
No, that's a good point.
Just because it's so cheap, interest rates are so high.
Yeah. Well, there was another article talking about the declining testosterone in men and the various causes, and one of them was increased poultry, which has a lot of hormones and stuff often pumped into it. So anyway, now the next one, this is actually beer prices around the world. This was sent in by a great listener, Warwick Cox. Warwick's a great entrepreneur that has big visions to achieve great things. And have a look at, again, it's not just our bloody home prices. Sydney and Melbourne top the world for half a litre of beer priced in US dollars. The cheapest is Shanghai, Beijing, Prague, Moscow, and then everywhere in between. But effectively, we're like $4.75, $4.59, and then it goes all the way down to 82 cents. That is a big difference, and we're getting screwed.
I can't see Brisbane on there, but the other day I paid $14 for a schooner.
Fuck.
Just down the road.
Of what?
It isn't. I have no idea. Like beer prices in Australia, it's insane.
Good thing I'm on a fast. Did I mention I was on a fast? I can't remember. It's like there's going to be this meme. How do you know someone's on a fast? Because they'll fucking tell you. So this is a group of people. This is a chart showing baseline blood pressure and then post mouthwash blood pressure. So they did a test, and blood pressure rose across pretty well all cohorts. There is a couple that it didn't, but apparently it's because mouthwash product wiped out the nitric oxide producing bacteria in the mouth. And that by wiping out that bacteria, that actually leads to an increase in blood pressure. And that's the problem with the world we live in now, with more data and more science. Like pretty well everything will be good for you and fucking kill you at the same time. I don't know how to actually keep up. Let's move into some economic ones. This is for the US, the University of Michigan. This is going back to 1975-ish. The expectations of unemployment. So they survey people, and do you think there's going to be more unemployment or less unemployment? And we've now reached the highest rate in 45 years. But what you'll note is that this often peaks just before recessions, and has been a reasonable indicator with these big peaks of recession coming, which I think one of the themes when you really drill into the stock market is not the economy. If you look at the US, the S&P 500 driven by 7 hyperscalers on the back of AI are masking a lot of things, I think. And this chart here is probably the scary one for me, because this goes back to like 1990. This is the US tech sector's CapEx growth, the 5-year CAGR, and then also the TMT CapEx growth. And what we find is that when CapEx is being driven up, we get these big market cycles. And then when CapEx falls significantly, we can actually get some of the drawdowns. But we are now effectively the strongest CapEx cycle that ever, actually, on this chart. It's breached just before the GFC, and it's breached before last time's tech wreck. And so that's one of the concerns I do have, is that the sheer amount of money going into AI, supported by AI and all of that recycling, once that bursts, I have a feeling we're going to see some significant things. But just remember, don't try and time the market. It's just more understanding where we're going. This is a chart going back to 2007 for Australia that looks at the percentage of home loan growth split between owner-occupiers and investors. Have a look at the investors that have come off the sidelines since 2024 and are still going. It's gone from 3% up to nearly 9%. That's a tripling of home loan growth for investors. So investors are just piling in, and we wonder why homeowners are getting priced out. And here's the Google searches for investment property going back to 2006. We have a look at that. Is just for listeners at home, it goes up and down a little bit across the last 20 years, but it is just up and to the right since the beginning of 21, but then it had a pause until 23, and then from 24 just up and to the right. So many people searching investment property. So
my question is, why do you Google investment property as opposed to searching REA, whatever?
that's a good question.
Probably to understand tax, how you can optimize.
The negative gearing.
Yeah.
So this is a chart buying a home in 1985 versus 2022. So this is the baby boomers on the left-hand side, the median household income and what the median house price was. And so the median household income was 23,000 and the median home price was 83,000. Fast forward to the poor old millennials. That's why it just upsets me a little bit with some of the older wealth that wants to stand in front of younger people and say it was all because of their hard work, their genius, their intelligence. Well, it doesn't actually take a lot of hard work and intelligence to buy some property in the 70s, 80s and early 90s and just sit on it and do fuck all. You've had a huge tailwind.
And that's 22 data. I feel like in Brisbane in the last 3 years, it's probably doubled again. Like it is just nuts at the moment.
This chart is actually the house prices going back to 2018 for the UK. It's also up and to the right, and they've now hit record home prices. But just have a look. The average UK property price is £299,000. So yes, it's record, but it's certainly a more affordable place to live. This is a chart plotting democracy versus corruption. And there are no countries that are rated both highly democratic and highly corrupt. I have a feeling the US is going to move more onto there, because when you have a look at what's happening there, you can't tell me it's not pay to play. And then all of the magical things that happen with option markets and now poly market, you can bet on some really weird things that the government does. You can't tell me that there's not corruption there.
I agree. I feel like this is definitional. Like in a democratic society, we have like rules for party donations and whatever else, but it's transparent corruption. Like this, I feel like this is just a question of definition.
Now, speaking of corruption, somebody went for the federal elections in Russia back to 2000 and then plotted the number of votes that Putin, Medvedev, or the United Russian Party got in terms of percentages. And so as you get more up and to the right, see how you can get really visible grid numbers. And what someone is saying is you can't say that that's fair play, because humans that choose round numbers or numbers that end in 5 tend to be made up numbers. And the more you get to 80, 90 and 100% of a polling vote, and the fact that those grids come out, the less likely that is statistically going to be correct. Now, speaking of people that like dictators and that love Putin, Elon Musk, here's his tweets as a dot by time of day since he's bought Twitter. And it's almost like the second he bought it, he felt like he needs to hold this thing up single-handedly. The fucker doesn't get much sleep, but it would be fair to say that it's, between 3 a.m. and 10 p.m., 10 a.m., is when he seems to not be active on his phone. And then the midnight posting stuff, I think that's going to be ketamine fueled, no doubt. I'll skip that because I know Aaron's got to go. I'll put them in next week. This is the percentage of bald males by country, and it's significant.
Wait, am I reading this correct? So 40% of Australian men are bald?
Well, with pattern baldness.
Baldness.
So I think that would catch a few more people in there. So there's the Jacks, and then there's others that may be thinning out, but not ready to.
I'm in the thinning out category.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm counted in there.
Libby showed a photo of me just 4 years ago, and it's like my hair was dyed back then. Like the last 4 years of greyness on my hair is hurtful. And then finally, this is a chart of the forecast rain in southeast Queensland for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's a chart that shows a lot of rain coming, and I just bring that up because Aaron and Mara, Mikey Metcalf, who else is going?
Ben Southall
are getting on a barge and heading to Morton Island. I have been trying to pull off a Swifty to get across there, but it's a good time to visit.
Yeah, that's the heat map of Aaron thought about having a holiday. Let's just go and rain on that parade.
So, but the good thing is you won't get bogged because the sand will be hard.
No, well, with this much rain, you'll be able to just lie low over to Morton.
Yeah, exactly.
You could join us anytime.
All right, what are we looking forward to?
You're looking forward to eating, Don?
It's interesting. This podcast, I've not thought about food once until you've mentioned it. So my goal is to not.
So I am looking forward to a slow weekend. Went to Rufus on Tuesday night and it was way past my bedtime. So I feel like the rest of the week I've been paying for it.
Yeah, I'm the same. Looking forward to a slow weekend. Hopefully a bit more sleep.
You deserve it, Jack. And Aaron's left.
And Aaron's gone.
I'm looking forward to standing in the pool.
Yes, super exciting. When will they be done?
Well, you got to let it cure for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you tile it and then they do the stuff. But like all good plans that weren't planned, there's all these little changes that I keep doing and say, well, now we could do this. Well, as soon as we're going to do that, why don't I run a conduit through here? So I'm driving people insane. And then got some portfolio sessions today, which I'm really looking forward to. And then I've started just a shared doc, which I'll share with you in a little bit further when I'm starting to accumulate the pre-mortems, the happy Christmas, well done on a good year, here's why you're going to die, things for each of the companies.
Love it.
All right, catch ya.
Bye.
See you guys.
See you guys.
Bye.